showcase the mechanics of the build. Look at that. Look how beautiful that is. That was a perfect example of how that just ended up. You kind of want to be at the optimal distance, like I showed you in that clip, where the bone spear is going to finish. Hey, what's up? This is Chosen, and in this video, we're going to be going over the dominant Diablo 4 build, which is the Bone Spear Necromancer. We're going to go over the build, the skills, the aspects, the roles to get on your gear, the Paragon Board, and then also the mechanics of how to make sure you're getting maximum value out of this build while you're playing it on the battlefield, and showing you all of the footage right here and everything you're going to need to know about the Bone Spear Necromancer speed farming variant of the build. Let's get into it. Alrighty, now, first of all, I expect the Bone Spear Necromancer to be extremely popular next season. A lot of us were wrong about the Necromancer for the first couple weeks of Diablo 4 because Bone Spear is one of the best scaling abilities in the game. And as you can see on screen right there, I mean, look at those millions and millions of damage constantly popping off all over the map. So this would be a great season starter build to help you push into those Nightmare Dungeon 50s, 60s, and beyond as soon as possible. So we'll kind of go in order here, and we'll start with the gear and the skills section where we talk about what you want on different gear slots and some of the things that you're looking for in terms of stats. But also, it's worth noting, this is going to be a little bit more of a farming variant of the build. If you're trying to do Uber Lilith or Nightmare Dungeon 100, there would be a few little changes that you would make to adjust. This build is going to prioritize being able to farm a little bit more efficiently, and something for you to strive to get your account up and rolling with the Bone Spear Necro, not necessarily pushing Nightmare Dungeon 100. You'd obviously want to play a little bit different, and that's going to require a different video and a little bit of a different spec. But okay, what you're going to be looking for, we'll just go in order here. On the helm, we do want the Deathless Visage, and that's going to give us Bone Spear leaves behind echoes as it travels that explodes and deal damage. Now, this is going to come with the typical rolls on there, but look at that. You get crit strike damage for bone skills, so obviously amazing in a Bone Spear Necro build. Now, on our chest armor, what we're going to be looking for is armor, damage, bone skill damage, and physical damage, and the aspect we're going to put on is the one that gives us armor based on dealing damage, which is Disobedience. This is a very popular aspect, and you see a lot of people putting it on their amulet while they're leveling up because it just gives you so much toughness as you're trying to progress as fast as possible. And then on our gloves, we're going to want to make sure we get ranks to Bone Spear, Lucky Hit Chance. Lucky Hit Chance is going to be really good on this farming variant of the build. Obviously, Crit Chance, and then Lucky Hit to restore primary resource. And then we're going to put Accelerating on here for the aspect that gives us critical strikes with core skills, increase our attack speed for 5 seconds. Then on the pants, we're going to be going for armor, damage reduction from distant, willpower, and intelligence with the protecting aspect on here. Now, this is a little bit different than some of the builds that you'll see out there, but my thought process is here. If we're farming, we just want to be able to rescue ourselves that like once every minute or two that we end up in a sticky situation and things get a little bit rough where we might die. Well, what we've got right here is hit when not healthy. A bubble is going to burst around you that will make you immune while you're in the bubble, and it can occur every minute and a half or so. So this is a great mechanic to help keep you up in those situations that would have otherwise killed you and been super annoying when you're dying trying to farm around. So I think it's a pretty cool aspect to put on our pants for a build like this. And then for the boots, we're going for the movement speed. Movement speed after elite essence cost reduction is very important. And then ranks of corpse tendrils. And we're going to be going for the wind striker aspect that gives us critical strikes, will give us movement speed for 1 second up to 6 seconds. And then we're going to be going with the wind striker aspect because it is going to give us movement speed. We want to prioritize resource and attack speed and movement speed, and we want to be super consistent as we're traversing and trying to farm as efficiently as we can. Then over for the jewelry on the amulet, we're going to be going for ranks of the Evulsion passive. We'll talk about why that's important here in a second. Essence cost reduction, movement speed, and cooldown reduction. So a pretty standard route to go on the amulet there. Movement speed and cooldown reduction are very common in tons of different builds. And then we definitely want essence cost reduc and the Evulsion passive because it'll help us stack up our damage. Similar concept to what the sorcerer does in stacking up the Devouring Blaze on the amulet for their builds. Now, for the rings, gonna be a little bit different than you would expect maybe. You definitely want the vulnerable damage and crit chance always, but we want maximum essence and lucky hit chance on both of our rings. You can see maximum essence and lucky hit chance. It's just going to help the build flow a little bit better. Now, if you want to replace one of those with critical strike damage or something, obviously that's perfectly fine. You're going to hit a little bit harder. But when we're speed farming, Bone Necro is already hitting plenty hard enough, so we can kind of make it flow a little bit better by trying to get some of that essence and lucky hit chance instead of something maybe like the critical hit damage, but absolutely nothing wrong with getting that on there. It'll perform great as well. And then for the aspects on our jewelry, we're going with the grasping veins, and this is super important on your amulet. It's going to give you a good multiplier. You see that we gain the 20% increased crit strike chance for 6 seconds when you use corpse tendrils. That's why in the notes I've got a section where it talks about the gameplay rotation and talking about corpse tendril to proc your amulet aspect, and then we put that one on here to get the good multiplier of the crit strike damage to enemies damaged by corpse tendrils. So a great multiplier there to help you scale. On our ring, we're going to be putting the aspect of serration, and it's going to give us the ossified essence key passive, also increases critical strike damage by your bone skills. Obviously insane. And then this aspect right here is super, super rare. Just be prepared. You might not get the aspect of exposed flesh until level 80, 85, 90 even in some cases if you're unlucky. But it's going to give you lucky hit up to a 10% chance to grant essence when hitting a vulnerable enemy. So it's going to make the build flow so much better, especially in terms of a speed farming context. But what I have in the notes is if you cannot farm that until super late in the game, what you can do is use the aspect of torment from the Codex of Power until you get it. So you're either going to use aspect of torment or ideally this aspect of exposed flesh on one of your jewelry slots here with the ring. And then for our two-handed weapon, we're going to be stacking up the obvious choices where we've got crit strike damage, vulnerable damage, intelligence to really balloon up that main stat damage, and critical strike damage with bone skills. And then we're going to be using the splinter ring aspect to help us synergize really well with making sure that we're taking advantage of vulnerable. And for the gems, obviously, we're going to be using the emeralds whenever we can scale up our crit damage by doing so. In our armor, we're going to be putting topaz for damage reduction while control impaired. That is also going to synergize with our pants, hopefully rescuing us when we end up in sticky situations, will make us a lot tankier. And then we're going to put armor over in our jewelry. Now, for the skills and the different choices here special to the class, we're going to be sacrificing here. So what we want to do is we want to sacrifice our skirmishers because then we get crit strike chances increased by 5%. We want to be critting as often as possible. It will give us extra bone shards, as you'll see in the skill tree as well. And then over here for skeletal mages, we want to do this top one here where we can no longer get mages, but our maximum essence is increased by 15. And then down here for the golem, we want to take the one where we deal extra critical strike damage, obviously on the sacrifice there for those 3 different ones. And then the skills on the bar, this will segue us into the skills section where we go over the whole skill tree. But the thing you're going to be spamming the most is obviously the bone spear. We're going to be spamming that into enemies to kill them. You've got your left click with your bone splinters as your basic. You've got the blood mist as your get out of jail free card where it will make you immune and help you kind of get out of there. When we pair that with our pants helping protect us with the immunity bubble, we've got 2 different ways to help keep ourselves flowing even if we get into a tough situation. And then our other 3 ones we're going to be using to synergize with the build are corpse explosion, corpse tendrils, and bone storm. So, okay, then for the skill tree, we've got our bone splinters as our basic. If you do run into essence troubles, which you may, before you get the build perfectly min-maxed, you may have some troubles with essence. This will help you deal with that. And then also the enhanced version is going to give you the extra projectiles, and hitting the enemy with the same one at least 3 times will give you more crit chance. And obviously that's going to be great for us to crit and scale up our damage. Then as we slide down to the next section, obviously we're going to max out bone spear, and then our enhanced version is going to break it into 3 shards. And then the paranormal, if we critically strike with our first primary bone spear, that's what's going to give us the 5 bone shard projectiles that return back after we cast the bone spear. And when we talk about the mechanics of the build, I'll walk you through why positioning is important and how the skill shot of the bone spear can help you maximize your damage output. But there is also 3 other things that we want to max out here. You're going to take the in living energy to give you more essence, and then the imperfectly balanced is going to be your core skills are going to cost more essence, but they're going to give you a damage multiplier. That's why we need those lucky hits generating the essence, and we kind of need to worry about that because this helps us stack another multiplier. And then the hewed flesh is going to make lucky hits grant you a corpse, and it will double against bosses to help you keep everything flowing. Then into the next section, I do this a little bit different than some of the builds you might see out there. So first of all, for Corpse Explosion, we don't just put 1 point into it. We want to make it have a higher radius, but more importantly, get up here to Blighted because it will make it shadow damage. And what I can do then is I can synergize with this down here, the Reaper's Pursuit, where damaging enemies with darkness skills will increase movement speed by 5%, and we can constantly kind of proc that and keep that flowing. Necro has a little bit of trouble with being clunky and not having like a teleport skill and stuff like that. So that gives us a way to synergize here in a more speed farming flowing context, just to stack another movement speed bonus. And then we've got Blood Mist, which also goes on our bar, and you can see that is going to kind of make us immune for 3 seconds, help us get out of there if we get in a bad situation. But then also we can put a couple points in here and have Blood Mist leave behind a corpse every second. So you can use it in multiple ways. You need a corpse to start a fight and get things rolling, get your rotation flowing. Boom, you can pop Mist, and it will not only make you immune, but also generate a few corpses for you to get started. And then down here, we want to be putting a couple points into Grim Harvest, where consuming a corpse generates 6 essence. You can see how this all starts synergizing. You generate corpses, you consume them, you stack multipliers, you get essence, and it just constantly flows in a nice circle here with the Bone Necro. And then we also want to put 1 point down here in Fueled by Death, where you deal 3% increased damage for 6 seconds after consuming a corpse. Now, what you can do is you can go for the version where you max this out and get 3 out of 3 instead of 1 out of 3 by taking away the movement speed. Like if I remove this and then I remove like these two or something, I could get a couple more points to play with and get that extra damage multiplier. But I kind of like the consistency of just moving around a little bit more faster. You can play around with it and see which one you like more. If you like the movement speed version of having that constant stack because of the Corpse Explosion giving you the shadow damage, or if you just want to hit harder and kill the bosses a little bit faster or something. But I think you're going to hit plenty hard enough with Bone Spear. So for a farming context, I would try to stack up that extra movement speed. But again, totally up to you. And there's 2 different options you can kind of go with there. But then down into the next section, we're only putting 3 points into Death's Reach, which is going to give us the 12% multiplier to distant enemies. And we'll talk about that again here when we talk about the mechanics of how you want to position yourself versus like elite packs and bosses and stuff like that. Then as we move into the next section here, we've got Corpse Tendrils, and we're going to take both abilities here where we get the slow from Corpse Tendrils, and it's also going to pull them in and clump them up, which if I pop this down, so let me see if I can get an example of it clumping them right there. Yep, that was the example. So you do the Corpse Tendril and it clumps them on top of each other and kind of pulls them in so you can blast them all down with your Bone Spear Barrage. And then you've also got enemies damaged by Corpse Tendrils are vulnerable for 3 seconds. I don't think I have to tell you how good vulnerable is. We already talked about Reaper's Pursuit and how that's going to give us the movement speed, but we're kind of min-max. I would love to max this out. I would love to get more points in here and stack up the 15% movement speed, but there just really isn't anything I can take a bunch of points out of. You can play around with it if you want and see if there's a spot where you can find points to remove, but we end up kind of not wanting to lose any of this stuff, so we end up with 1 point in there, and it's at least some movement speed for us. And then there's 3 different ones down here where you want Serration, Compound Fracture, and Evulsion all to be maxed out. Now remember what we talked about in the gear and on the amulet, we said ranks of the Evulsion passive. Well, right here, you're going to see why that is so important. So what's Evulsion do? Your bone skills deal X 18% critical strike damage to vulnerable enemies. Great multiplier for us, and that's why we want that passive on our amulet. It's going to help us get those huge numbers that you love seeing with Bone Spear. And then Serration gives us the plus increased crit chance for each 10 essence you have on cast. We do want to keep our essence decently high when we're spamming our Bone Spears in this build. And then after critical striking 10 times with Bone Skills, your next one is going to get another multiplier for 5 seconds. So we're able to stack all 3 of these for huge benefit. And then we're getting to the bottom of the skill tree, but there is a couple things we want to make sure and take note of here, and that is this Memento Mori, and that is because the sacrificing of those skeletal warriors and skeletal mages is going to increase those massive bonuses that we're getting back here. Remember the warriors and the mages, where we're getting the crit chance, and we're also getting the essence, where we can synergize in the skill tree with this ability down here. So you definitely want to get 3 points into that, and you got to put 1 point in the standalone to get there. And then over here on the left side, Inspiring Leader, after you've been healthy for at least 4 seconds, you and your minions gain attack speed I love attack speed in this build. Some people do different variations where they don't really care about attack speed as much, but I love to flow and get those lucky hits flowing and keep the essence up and have that attack speed going in the build, especially when I'm trying to farm. So this is the version that I like to recommend to you in a farming Bone Necro build. Now the ultimate we're going to take is Bone Storm right here, because look at this. So we're getting damage reduction, great for a boss fight, and then we're going to be getting crit strike chance by 20%. Great for a boss fight. So you want to go into a boss fight, you're getting to like the end of a dungeon or whatever, you want to have Bone Storm up, and that's how you just pop that at the start of the fight, and you have damage reduction and a ton of crit chance. Then down here in the key passive, we are going to take our Ossified Essence, where Bone Skills deal increased damage for each point of essence you have above 50. That's why we want max essence, and that's why we want those lucky hits, generate a resource, and want to keep our essence high. And then we have the Paragon Board. Now, this part is really difficult to not bore you by going over the Paragon Board. So I'm going to try to give you kind of like the quick version, but obviously I'll always put the link down below if you want to look over node for node and follow it along. But I do want to talk about the glyphs that we have in the different sockets. So first up, we've got the Sacrificial Glyph, which is going to give us a big bonus to magic nodes. And look at the magic nodes that we've got all around here on the starting board. You got the damage, the willpower, the damage, armor, and just tons of useful stuff right here. So a great glyph to put in there on the starting board. Now on our second one, we've got our Gravekeeper Glyph, which is going to give us another bonus to the rare nodes. And look what we got right here. We've got intelligence, resistance, but more importantly, bone skill damage and more intelligence right there. So it ends up being a really good one to have right here. You've got the bone damage and all of that on our bone graph build. Then we slide on over here, and the glyph we've got here is Imbiber. Now, admittedly, Imbiber is not amazing. You could play around with trying something else. I couldn't find something that fit in here much better than Imbiber though, even though it's not super amazing. It does at least give us something. And then we have two boards branching off of there from the middle. Up here, we're going to take the Glyph Essence. For every 5 dexterity purchased within range, core skills are going to deal increased crit damage. Yes, please and thank you. And then down here, we're going to be taking our rare glyph of Exploit. Basically, every build puts Exploit in there because you're getting extra damage to vulnerable targets. I don't have to tell you how amazing that is. So yeah, not the most complicated setup here for Paragon. You got your 5 different boards and 5 different glyphs. There's some builds out there that have like 7 boards, so it doesn't get too crazy here with the Necro. And like I said, I'll have it down there if you want to follow like node for node and go along with it. Then we have under the notes section, we already talked about the exposed flesh aspect that we had over on our ring right here. That is super rare, so take note of that and possibly consider going with the aspect of Torment from your Codex of Power if you aren't able to get a hold of that. And then our gameplay rotation is pretty simple. You want to kind of like Bone Spear from a distance as you're coming into a room or coming into a pack. Try to create a corpse to get your rotation rolling, and then do Corpse Tendril to proc your multiplier, synergize with your amulet, and then we Bone Spear and blow everything up. Bone Spear is going to apply vulnerable because of the aspect in our main hand. Remember that one right here, the splintering aspect. And then also a lucky hit is going to help us keep essence up from the gloves and the exposed flesh aspect. But okay, now let's showcase the mechanics of the build. Look at that. Look how beautiful that is. That was a perfect example of how that just ended up flowing in the loop of some of the footage that I've got flowing here. So you want to skill shot a little bit with your Bone Spear, and I'll show you why. So as you're kind of positioning, what you're going to be doing here, let me make this a little bit bigger. There we go. Okay, so what the Bone Spear is going to do, your original one, that's this one right here, the big box of the Bone Spear. This is your original one that goes towards the target. Well, what it's going to do, it's going to break up into 5 splinters that come from this origin point, and then they kind of fan out at an angle. So the skill shot of it is you kind of want to hit things like elite packs and bosses, and like when your corpse tendrils group things up, you kind of want to be at the optimal distance like I showed you in that clip, where the Bone Spear is going to finish and return as close to that target point as possible. Because what you can see here is if this is my target, like this is my boss or whatever, I've got every single bone shard hitting it on the way back. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all of them hitting on the return. But look what happens if I am standing close to the boss. Like say I hit the boss like this, I'm only going to have 1, 2 of those bone shards hitting it on the way back. So that's why you do want to kind of stand at the optimal range and kind of play around with it for a few minutes and learn what that full range is of the bone spear so you can get super consistent and be a lot more reliable with your damage by making sure you're hitting as much as possible with the different bone spear and the shards as they return. And I can kind of play this for a little bit right there. You can see the range right there. Yeah, it goes about maybe like 50-60% of the screen. Right here, you're going to see it. So you back up a little bit, get to max range, and then boom, you see how it hits the whole crowd. We pierce through it, and then all of our shards kind of return back. And you want that bone spear to break up kind of just past the targets. And you can see that over on the left side of the screen here, where we've got the descriptions. You got your enhanced bone spear, where bone spear is going to break into 3 shards when it is destroyed. And then the paranormal that we got in the skill tree is bone spear has a 5% increased crit strike chance. And then if bone spear's primary projectile, so the primary projectile is this first one that we cast that goes away from us. That's our primary projectile. And if it critically strikes that first primary one, we're going to get 2 additional bone shards upon being destroyed. So we got the 3 from the main enhanced version plus the 2 from the paranormal. And that's what gives us this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bone spears that break up and return after our bone spear is destroyed, ideally right past the target. And to illustrate this for you a little bit better, I want to show you some footage here really quick. So what you're going to see is a bone spear come out and then return, and I want you to get a feel for what the distance is going to be here. So let me go ahead and play this slowed down for you. Okay, so there's our bone spear that we shoot out, and you're going to see it goes about maybe, I don't know, 60 or 70% of a screen, and then right there it breaks up and you see those 5 shards returning in that cone that I kind of illustrated for you when we were on the drawing pad. So let me show you that here again so you can get a feel for what that looks like and the distance you want to stand. So right there, boom, we've got the boss. We're kind of coming into a room, we're at maximum distance, and then it's going to break up right behind and it's going to return back just like that. And I've got one more clip kind of showcasing it here afterwards. On this next one right here from a different direction, boom, we fire up as we're entering the room, and then right there, it's gonna break and return back. And you wanna learn that distance so that you can always be hitting things like bosses and elite packs as many times as possible. Oh, and that was actually a good one to show. Okay, so let me show that one. Okay, so that's one that only returned with 3. So this next one here, boom, that one right there, that one doesn't critically strike anything, and you're gonna notice it only breaks up into 3 because we don't get that extra effect. See that right there? There's only 3 of them coming back. I can write on the screen. You've got 1, 2, 3, and we are missing the 4 and the 5 because we didn't proc that extra effect. So sometimes you're going to see 3, sometimes you're going to see 5, and you want to operate at that optimal distance to min-max your damage and hit things with as many of those shards as possible. So I hope you enjoyed this look at the Bone Spear farming Necro. It would mean a lot to earn your sub below. I'm going to be trying to cover as many of the different meta builds and as many of the classes in the game and break them down for you like this so you can choose what matches your playstyle and what you want to start Season 1 with and branch out to learning as much as I can about all the different classes in the game and make sure I can cover all of those builds for you to help you pick which one best suits you. So that'll do it for me on this one. And like I said, I will link to everything you need down below to pull up on your end if you want to see things like the skill tree, the Paragon Board, and all of that. So I appreciate all of you. I will see you soon in the next video. Have a good rest of your day. Peace.